Listen, you guys, I am too excited to tell you about this one. And you guys have read the title, you've seen the thumbnail, we know what we're here for, so let's just all agree that we're a bit too excited for a nice chill intro. Hello, I'm Miss Twisted, you can call me Charlotte, I do cosplay and makeup and other weird and whimsical stuff. And to celebrate the premiere of Arcane Season 2, Red Bull have commissioned me to bring Enforcer Vi to life. I love Vi. I love her visual design. There's so much emotion behind her character. There's weight and momentum behind every action and punch. She's so cool. I just hope that I can do her justice with this cosplay. And did I mention I had 3 weeks to make this one? Yes, this is a speed build because I really wanted it to come out with the premiere of the show. So I gave myself 1 week to work on the base of the cosplay and then 2 weeks for her amazing Atlas gauntlets. I knew I was gonna need every spare hour for those gauntlets because I wanted them moving and lighting up because let's be honest, they're kind of the coolest part of this cosplay. Before I get stuck into the crafting, let me tell you a little bit more about the Red Bull and Arcane campaign. Now there's a few different things going on, but one of the ways that you can get involved is going into your local Woolworths from November 13th to scan and win exclusive in-game prizes. Or you could win a trip for 2 to see League of Its Own in Europe in 2025. Yes, that's right, this campaign is for my fellow Aussies. I'll tell you guys a little bit more details later on too, but for now, we're gonna throw it back to Pa Charlotte to start working on Vi's awesome Enforcer jacket. All right, to get started on making her vest/jacket thing, I'm gonna have to do one of my least favorite things, make a mock-up. All right, let's do this. So a duct tape pattern is a classic in cosplay. You wrap either a mannequin or yourself with some cling wrap of some sort, and then start to cover that up with tape. Usually duct tape, as the name suggests, but I'm using this orange fragile tape. I've told this story a bunch of times, but long story short, one time I ordered way too much of this stuff and have been trying to use it up in my projects ever since. I'm using some masking tape here to create a line down the front of the chest where those panels are going to be, basically where the seam is. And then a little more to mark the center of the chest and where those side seams are going to be. Time to cut this one off the mannequin, so I'm going to cut this right up that side seam, around the armhole here, up the back, and down those front seams. So these are going to give me the very rough shapes and measurements that I want to trace out onto my calico to make my pattern. Now I'm not going to try and give you a detailed tutorial for this part because I don't entirely know what I'm doing myself here. But I never liked using commercial patterns, and this is kind of just the easiest way for me to get my head around the kind of shapes that I need to sew together to make this garment. Even if it is a lot of just trial and error. But hopefully these pieces will at least conform to my body shape and I can make some alterations as I go. Since this one is a mock-up, everything is getting a straight stitch, nice and lazy. All I need is for it to hold its shape while I try it on. Alright, round 1 mock-up already in terms of like the vest fit, and this is very encouraging because this is not far off what I want already. There's a couple of bits where I'm going to like draw the lines on slightly differently, tuck it in a little tiny bit around the waist, that sort of thing. But they were off to a good start right now. Okay, round 2 of patterning this one, and I think this mock-up is it now. I've basically just done a couple of cuts to get some angles here. I've added in a collar. Right now it's giving Dracula. There's far too much collar going on. That's an easy fix. So at this point, I was confident enough in my mock-up to cut this straight out of this beautiful blue sateen. My back panel and side panels are getting just the blue with no lining, as I want to try and keep most of this garment as light and flexible as possible, but the collar and front panels are getting a black lining. So these pieces I am going to sew together along the edge and then turn the whole thing inside out, pressing it down with an iron so it's nice and neat. I'm going to sew the rest of the pattern pieces together and add some sleeves, which I forgot to get footage of. Sorry guys. Okay guys, I think we have the base of our uniform ready to rumble, and I'm really happy with how this is looking. Everything's sitting smoothly. You can see I've added some sleeves, the collar's sitting nicely. I've got this one attached with like press studs or snaps that I can basically use like a machine to punch in. I know that like the zip would be the obvious choice, but what I like about press studs is you can literally just be like this and it's undone, which is gonna make it very easy if I'm getting a little bit too warm. I need to take off some layers. For now, it's time to start thinking about how I'm gonna do all of those gold details. Alright, bit of a change of plans. I really wanted to use this absolutely beautiful textured gold vinyl from Lumen's Workshop, but because I kind of want to use it like bias binding, having it kind of folded over like one of the edges like this, I think that might be a little bit too thick. So what I've found is a slightly thinner option. This is just like a vinyl ribbon that I got from Spotlight, and I'm just gonna like wrap that around the edges, and you can already see like both color wise and texture wise, that is a pretty good fit.
So my game plan here was to sew this with the right sides together along one edge, and to hide the top of these press studs, I'm going to just fold this one over to create that nice neat edge. Because I don't really want to use my sewing machine around these metal press studs, I'm just going to fabric glue this one. I found it takes pretty well to this vinyl, but anywhere I can use my sewing machine, I'm sewing this one on with some gold thread.
She is looking really lovely, if I do say so myself. All of my gold work is looking mostly pretty neat. There's a couple of bits, I don't know if you can see, where I've damaged the vinyl just a little bit from having the iron too hot, but it's battle damage, okay? We're just gonna leave it there. I'm probably gonna do touch-ups towards the end once I've done absolutely everything and seeing how it all looks together. We're gonna do the belty bits.
For my belty bits, I have some lovely soft faux leather, and I've got some fabric glue here I'm helping to assist me in folding this one over, and then reinforcing this one with a stitch down those edges, being careful to have that stitch line away from where that fabric glue line would be, just because it can make your needle a little bit gunky. I'm adding a bit of a decorative stitch right down the center here for no other reason than it looks kind of cool. Now I want to have this belt section basically sewn into place, so I'm going to pin this exactly where I want it and sew that down, being very careful because this is now going through a lot of fabric at once.
I want to take a second here to acknowledge that I'm going to gloss over a fair bit to do with the shoulder pads, the pants, the knee pads, the belty bits. All of those things are important and kind of cool, but they're all like foam and paintwork, and there is going to be plenty of that once we get to the Atlas gauntlets. And I will readily admit, part of me is just impatient to get to the gauntlets. They've got moving parts attached. Of course they're going to be my favorite part.
The buckle section, I'm just sort of sketching onto some paper to get the rough dimensions that I need, and I'm going to draw that up a little bit better onto some cardboard with some tiny pieces of EVA foam glued on to create a little bit more of that dimension and depth. And I'm just going to stick a sheet of warbler over the top, heat it until it is soft enough that I can push that into the gaps around those pieces of EVA foam. With the rest of the warbler folded under, that creates a pretty convincing buckle shape. My badge is 2 panels of EVA foam covered in vinyl and that cotton sateen. This black disc is a cabochon I had in my fabric stash that I just spray painted black and glued straight on. I'm going to line this with some gold elastic and get my badge and my buckle piece now attached to those belty pieces. And I've got some little foam and vinyl pieces that I'm using for the details. To join these belt pieces together and to reinforce across the waist here, I'm sewing in one of these little buckle clips on one side and the other piece is glued behind that badge. So we've got a nice sturdy attachment. Moving on to Vi's Pauldrons, I just sort of guesstimated this paper pattern using trial and error and a little bit of cardboard. I'm going to cut out this pattern onto some 4mm thick EVA foam. With the lines where these creases are going to be, I'm going to cut on an angle, basically a little bevel strip out of here, so that it's going to be nice and easy for me to fold on this line without it cutting all the way through on this side. I'm going to blast this piece with a little bit of a heat gun. You can see that the foam is starting to go a little bit darker as I go. This is basically heat sealing it in, which is going to make it easier to prime later. But the main reason why we're heat gunning it right now is so that it gets soft and malleable, and we can kind of fold it a little bit into place, which is just going to help hold some of those creases. Once that piece is cooled down, we're going to apply some clear contact cement along these edges. Wait a few minutes for this one to dry up a little bit because it'll make it super tacky, so that when you put this in place and start to glue it, it instantly bonds, and that is not letting go. We're going to add some details with some more strips of EVA foam. Now for the smaller details, Lumen's Workshop, my local place, sells these pre-cut foam half dowels and bevels and all sorts of like detailed edges. So with some clever cutting here and there, you can create some really detailed shapes without having to cut every single piece out from scratch from a big flat piece of EVA foam. Combining these and my regular cutting out, I'm creating a pretty decent pattern here. So with my lovely pauldrons built up and a couple of knee pads on the side, we are ready to rumble with some priming and painting. So for priming, I'm using Flex Bond. It has a very similar texture to like PVA glue, and I'm just gonna paint that over everything. I really like this for things like this because it pulls in some of those edges and helps just smooth out some of those seams. Usually I would thin out and apply thinner coats for this Flex Bond just to avoid any paint strokes, but I was lucky enough to not really have that problem. The next morning, these are all getting several light coats of matte black spray paint. And a few hours later, once the paint is fully dry, I'm using some frog tape to mask all of those sections I want to stay black. Frog tape is similar to masking tape, but it seems to have like slightly less grip, so it doesn't pull up the paint beneath it. So now I can layer some gold spray paint over the top and finish this one off with a more yellowy gold just to make that color pop. Now comes the really satisfying part, peeling off all of that tape for these beautiful crisp edges. I did some hand painting to finish these ones up later on, and they are perfect. So these pieces are some more of that faux leather that I've sewn together with some stabilizer through the middle, and I'm just going to use some fabric glue to glue these straight to these pants. The pants with the dip-dyed bottom look a little bit funny right now, but trust the process. Actually, don't trust the process, you can see them right now.
Alright, you guys, this is looking freaking awesome, if I do say so myself. Like, seeing this all on, oh my goodness, it's very satisfying. Everything moves nicely, like there's a good bit of movement and everything. Getting the details of this costume did take like a little bit of guesswork here and there because we don't really have any super clear concept art out yet of Vi's Enforcer uniform, but I think this is a pretty good rendition of what we got so far. This means the only thing left to focus on are her Atlas gauntlets, which quite frankly is going to be more than half of the time spent on this costume because I want those to be epic, because if they are epic, everything else is going to pale in comparison, because let's be honest, they are the focus of this costume. So I think I might need a bit of a boost for this one. Okay, so I've been doing some research. Turns out a lot of characters have giant fists of some sort. So I've kind of cherry-picked some different ideas that I want to try for mine. Basically, a lot of them boil down to something like this, where you have like string running up like the fake fingers, which connect onto some sort of ring or pulley that you can control with your actual fingers inside the glove. I want to try and employ some gears, because the one thing that I've seen out of a lot of these is they have very little movement through the fingers because of the fact that the fingers you're trying to move are so much larger than your actual fingers. The movement just doesn't quite translate. I'm going to go to the hardware store and come back, and hopefully once I start putting a frame together, you guys will see the vision. Alright, be right back.
The hardware store's not far from my local Woolworths, so let me take a second to show you how you can scan, play, and win from November 13th. Once you finish shopping, look for one of these awesome stands near the checkouts. Scanning this QR code is going to take you straight to the Red Bull and Arcane quiz. So I hope you've been brushing up on your Arcane knowledge. Complete the quiz for a shot at those rewards. I did pretty well myself, but for now, it's back home for some crafting.
Okay, and we're back. Also, I might have gone a little bit overboard, but this is going to be a lot of experimenting. So let's just see how we go. All right, we got some PVC pipes. My hope is to make these into some sort of structural frame, just to give us like a starting off point that everything else can be built on.
So like a true professional, I'm literally just gonna trace out my hand and kind of use that as a base to draw the rough dimensions of the frame around it. No measurements, just vibes. Which at this point is basically a universal motto when it comes to cosplay for me. Now we're going to be heating up some PVC piping, so safety first. I want to heat this up just enough that I can bend it to create a corner. On this section here, I'm going to heat up this entire bottom area because I want to bend it to create a corner and flatten this middle section with a hand mirror, again, like a true professional. And since the hand mirror wasn't quite cutting it, the makeup palette did the rest. Okay, and we're off to a pretty good start. Heading out to the garage to cut through some PVC pipe to create some smaller pieces. This is going to serve as a handle later on. Bringing my drill set with me back inside, we're going to poke some holes in the side of this PVC coupling and the PVC piping, and with a flat-headed bolt, we're going to join these two together. And this bolt was only just long enough, so it did take some effort to get the nut on the other side, but worth it in the end because now it's a nice close fit with no extra bolts sticking out. With 4 more bolts and nuts installed, this is well and truly attached to my PVC frame. A little bit of heat gun and a little bit of a squish just to make this one a bit more of an oval shape, just to better fit my arm through it when I attach the handle. And for the handle, I'm going to poke holes with a much wider drill bit. Blast that area with the heat gun, just enough that it's malleable enough that you can just poke the handle into that section. No need for extra nuts and bolts, and I guess you could probably chuck a little bit of hot glue into that section if you really want to reinforce it, but that is not going anywhere. On the top here, you can see I've added in a second flat section, and all of these are getting holes through to help guide the fishing line later on.
Good morning, guys. We are looking fantastic. I've just finished these off this morning. They don't look like much just yet, but having that really solid foundation is going to make my life way easier later on. These are going to make sure it holds its shape. They are comfy and they are easy to handle. So yeah, pretty good start. On this one here, I just did a little test drive attaching some fishing line to a little wooden ring. This is eventually going to be how I control the fists. For now, I want to start building up the fingers because I can't really test run this until I have some fingers to actually move. So that's today's job. You guys, really quickly, I just remembered a thing that I have had sitting in the bottom of one of my craft drawers for around 2 years. This is, well, I don't know what it's called on its own, but it comes as a thing called a screw head toggle, which comes with some screws as well. But I mean, long story short, what it does is you can fold it all the way through and it'll always spring back up because it's got an inbuilt spring. And I think you can see where I'm going with this one, right? This can provide both the hinge on the back of each of the knuckles, and it provides that spring so that essentially it's going to automatically push the hand back out to the open neutral position. I'm just really happy that I found these.
But I am going to need 30 of them, so back to the hardware store.
So using my patented secret technique of gluing foam to more foam, I have basically a bunch of finger joints now. So basically I've got like 3 joints and essentially just a base that will help this one bend all the way over. And so with the little spring toggle joint things, my plan is to essentially attach them embedded in the foam in those 3 sections.
I'm cutting out a little ridge on the top side here on each of these joints. I have this plastic tubing that I found in my craft stash, and this is going to be a great little guide for the fishing line. Now the fishing line I've essentially sewn into the top joint here. We're going to thread those down through those tube sections. And with one last bit of tubing in this hole at the bottom, hopefully this will work.
All right, check this out. That is pretty damn good with the movement, right? The only thing that of course you might notice is that like the whole thing's falling over from this joint. So I'm thinking I might reinforce at least this bottom one with a bit of extra elastic, just to make sure that like all of these joints move a little bit more evenly. So I'm gonna do that to all 10 fingers. Oh God, there's so many fingers.
Luckily, I had this really thin elastic that I could actually just sew on with a needle, so that worked out really well. It meant that all I really needed to do was like thread it through, tie it off, and that was just enough to take that extra tension. It might have taken an entire day, but I got all of my fingers done. Straight into the next day, we are applying some glue down on my base and the base of the fingers so that we can start attaching these one by one. Now I'm threading that fishing line through the holes in that base before I'm gluing it down and sort of pulling on it as I glue it down to make sure that it's free of the glue and still moving fine. I'm trying to tie on these rings with like just enough tension to not pull the finger, but enough to sort of hold it in place so it's not gonna like swing around inside the glove. Also, I definitely should have done this before I tied the ring on, but I ended up wrapping these rings around in this like stick-on bandage just because it's going to be like a little bit more grippy, I guess. As I'm attaching these fingers, I'm trying to leave like a bit of space between each one as well, just so I've got room to put on the extra foam later on.
So I think my base is now ready to go with this one. All of these are moving. The only one that's not moving independently is the thumb because I had to attach it to the index finger ring. I was gonna have it separate, but I realized I'm gonna get so little movement out of my thumb. It just wasn't very practical. Aside from that, all of the fingers move independently and they make a fist really well. And it looks like there's enough movement that I don't even have to worry about adding gears or anything like that to get that full movement. There's, as you can see, like a little bit of adjusting here and there to make sure that movement is smooth. But for now, I can actually start building up the fists, which I really need to get a wriggle on because I have less than a week left now. Okay, let's do this.
If you've been following my channel for a while, you're well aware that I am deathly allergic to anything involving instructions, maths, or measurements. So I'm just freehanding, sketching my shapes of roughly what the foam is going to look like. And then my plan is just to adjust these as I go with whatever works. For now though, we just want a nice thick sturdy base, so I'm using this 10mm foam again. And I'm trying to cut most of my pieces on like a 45-degree angle. It's going to make it easier later on when I'm gluing these together. So these are going to be the top of the glove, and for the bottom here, I've just got like a larger, flatter piece just because it doesn't need quite as much dimension. Once my contact adhesive has gotten nice and tacky, I'm going to press these against my cutting mat as I'm pressing these seams together. Hopefully this will help keep those seams nice and neat. Once that top seam is in place, I'm going to start to lift this into place to create that beautiful angle. With the same on the other side, now I've got my lovely top piece here and I'm just going to glue this straight over my frame. And if I've gotten the width right, that should be just enough wide at the top there to just about cover that PVC piping. With just enough room for a bit of EVA foam, of course. With the bottom section in, the casing is complete and I have made sure there's just enough room in here that I can still move my fingers to control the, well, fingers. We are jumping straight into the foam details here because I have so little time to lose at this point. And look, I'd love to give you guys patterns and things like that, but honestly, I'm just making it up as I go along. There's a lot of me referring back to the little sketches that I made and also whatever screenshots I've got from season 1, the poster for season 2. I'm even using some fan art and 3D models just to get an idea of space, though I'm kind of taking all of those with a grain of salt since they're not like official sources. I briefly mentioned when I was making the Pauldrons, the pre-cut strips of EVA foam that Lumen's Workshop sells. These are going to come in clutch throughout making these gauntlets. Alright, the gloves are looking fantastic. We're off to a good start. I'm going to take a nice bit of a break now to go get my hair done. Apparently, I hate wigs so much that I'm prepared to spend several $100s changing my hair to pink. I'm cutting my audio here because you can't hear a thing anyway. I just brought a picture of Vi into my regular hairdresser, Blondes by B, and just said, hey, do whatever you can to get me looking like this. When I get out of here, I've got to smash out the bulk of the Atlas gauntlets, so I'm going to need some wings to get me through. It's so pink. It's so good. Look at that color.
Well, that was awesome. My brain is very confused by the straight hair, but I have no time to get used to that. I have to get back into this foam work. Genuinely, the best way to make any kind of circle is find a thing in your house that is the right size circle and trace over it. Like, that's it. That's all there is to it.
So what I'm doing here is trying to redraw that little dial section right in the middle of the glove. Luckily, those little wheels I was going to use as gears I'm putting to good use here. Now I've got some of those pre-cut foam strips I've been talking about. These are like a triangle shaped one, and that's going to create like a really nice border around these dials. For the tiny little rivet pieces, I'm just using some pearl rhinestone stickers. When I first started working on the Atlas gauntlets, I was really intimidated just by the sheer complexity of them, but once I started like actually building this up step by step, I don't know, basically it just becomes far less intimidating once you start breaking those down into steps. It's kind of like building it up with Legos, except Legos with power tools and toxic chemicals. Oh, and some of these larger pieces on the top, I found that if I blast them with a heat gun as I glue them down, they'll curve really nicely around those edges. Alright, cutting out a shape for this little gem section at the front of the gauntlet here. For the border of this shape, I actually cut one of my trapezium strips in half. That way the border will be quite tall, but also still really skinny to allow me to put some lights underneath.
Oh my goodness, it feels so good to take that off. I feel like after this, I'm gonna have like a permanent indent on my face. Anyway, we are making some pretty decent progress. Like these are starting to look really, really cool, which I'm very happy about. One thing I realized is that I really should have thought about doing lights sooner, right? Because this little gem area here, and then this strip down here, and I think around the side of this like compassy area, all needs to glow. All right, so I ordered these light strips online. I think they're cob lighting, and I don't know anything about electronics, but apparently they should be higher quality than just like standard LEDs. Now, when it comes to anything that involves technology, I'm basically a grandma. I don't know how anything works, and I can't get my head around it besides plug in and play. So hopefully these ones do exactly that. All right, luckily I have a USB thing literally attached to my desk. Oh my goodness. Oh, that is bright. Oh, I'm excited for this. Okay, all right, this is, yes. Okay, given this has got like a USB connector, I think that means I probably want to have like a portable charger or something like that on the inside of the glove to power these, which is easy enough. I think I need something to diffuse them, and I especially want something for that little gem shape because I kind of want it to still look good when the lights are off. So my first thought was this sort of holographic-ish vinyl that I've had sitting in my craft drawer for a while. I bought this originally to make like a Faye-inspired makeup earlier this year. I'll put a link to that somewhere here. Criminally underrated video, if I do say so myself. Side note, did a little test piece with this vinyl where this end is just as is, but over here, I've basically just sprayed it with a little bit of matte varnish, and it's kind of given it this frosted effect, which I think I kind of like. I might go with this.
Making it up as I go along, as per usual, I'm poking a little hole in the EVA foam right here next to the dial so that I can pull all of the electrical cording into the inside of the gauntlets. From here, I'm slowly sticking down this lighting, and I'm discovering the hard way that these are not really meant to curve around corners. In hindsight, I probably should have looked at like putting them on more of an angle rather than just trying to brute force them into a curve, but we got there in the end.
Okay, change of plans again, because I have this cellophane that was also in my craft stash. It was also already scrunched up, but I was looking at it thinking, hey, it kind of looks frosted, like it might diffuse some light. So if you like scrunch it up like this in a little tubey shape over that, again, you probably can't tell that much in camera because it kind of looks very diffused anyway, but here it does a great job of dispersing the light, and it's a really cool effect.
And I will show you what that looks like in just a minute once I get this all glued down. And to help with the diffusion, I'm sanding down the back side of this vinyl before I spray the other side with the mattifying spray to create this sort of frosted look. And I absolutely adore how this looks with the vinyl over the top. I had to turn my brightness way down to see this effect in camera, but in natural lighting, even with the naked eye, you can see that beautiful crystalline effect glowing through.
Good morning, guys. We have both of the gloves now complete, at least on the top half, and everything is still moving really nicely. So what do we got left? We got the sides and we've got the bottom here, and then we're going to have to do something with these fingers and the knuckles as well. So I think if I'm clever with my time, I may even be able to finish off the foam work today. So let's see how we go. Okay, well, the good news for me is that it looks like the bottom is pretty sparse. There's not heaps of detail on there.
And because most of the detail is just extra line work, again, I was just getting such good use out of these pre-cut strips. I actually had some really thick tubes of EVA foam, and I've used a hacksaw to cut these little circular sections, which I'm going to use for both the knuckles and some of the pieces on the side of the gauntlets. I'm combining a couple of these with the little triangle strips to make these little crosses that go on the side of the gauntlets. Honestly, I'm pretty chuffed with how much of the stuff from my various craft stashes I was just able to use in this project. So now I kind of feel justified in like never throwing anything away.
We are almost done on these gloves, which is really good because outside of today, I have basically 3 days left of crafting before I need to get this video edited and done, which doesn't sound like too big of a deal, but remember, like, I have to do all of the priming, all of the painting, all of those little detailed work and weathering, so we've still got a lot to do. I think I've only got a few hours left of the foam work, which is good news. The only thing really left are these fingers, because right now they're looking a little bit bare. They're kind of giving Five Nights at Freddy's.
Freddy, you're supposed to be on lockdown.
Now, I've been mucking around a little bit with shapes and how to do this, and this seems to be the best solution I've found so far. So it's literally just a piece of foam that I've cut some bevels into the back of, so that's got like this nice little shape like this. And essentially I want to just create like little covers that's going to cover all the fingers. It's going to help bulk it out. It's going to give me like a nice neat surface on the top. I'm probably going to do like an extra piece of foam that comes around here, but it'll still leave that gap where those joints need to be. So hopefully it doesn't interrupt the movement, so I still have that full articulation.
I know I already made my FNAF joke, but tell me this doesn't look like I'm giving Freddy Fazbear a manicure.
Oh, that took a long time. Okay, so it is time to do some priming.
Flex Bond would usually be my go-to primer, but just because of the sheer size of this project and the speed in which I have to work, I'm just using Plastidip because it's gonna dry faster and give me a large amount of coverage in a short space of time. I'm still letting the Plastidip dry completely between each coat, and 3 or 4 coats later, I'm adding in a metallic blue to give everything a really nice sheen and base layer. Once that is fully dry, we are coming inside, and I'm just going to start painstakingly taping up all of those panels to make sure they stay blue. Seriously, this bit took like the better half of a day just to get everything taped up. Honestly, it might have taken a similar amount of time for me to just hand paint the gold sections, but I don't think I could have gotten quite as crisp lines and even paintwork as I can with spray paint. Okay, first base layer of a matte white. Coming in with a couple more coats of this gold, followed by my favorite yellow gold, the same one I used on my Pauldrons.
All right, so far that's pretty promising. Now comes hopefully the very satisfying part where we get to peel off some of this tape. Oh yes, absolutely. Yes, look at that color coming through. There is like a very specific part of the brain that it hits to do this and have like a lovely, neat, crisp line like that.
I realized I forgot to tape up this little section on the bottom here, but luckily because it was on the vinyl, it scraped off pretty easily with my hobby knife.
All right, you guys, we are in the home stretch. We are so close to having these finished, and I'm really excited because this is now my favorite part of like any cosplay prop, which is doing all of the detail painting. Because right now, I mean, it's looking pretty good, but it is kind of looking a little bit flat. So we're gonna add in a ton of dimension to this one. And I'm gonna go really ham on adding in the shading and some outlines to this one because Arcane already has like that very stylized, painterly presentation. I can get away with going a little bit heavy on those details. So for the detail work, I've got some oil paints. You can kind of use like any paints. I think I just kind of like the texture of oil paints. They've got like a really nice smooth buttery texture to them. And if you stuff something up, you can use like a tissue or a cotton bud to like lift that paint off pretty easily. Oh, and between all of these coats of priming and painting, I have been like testing out the fist to make sure that like none of those chemicals and paints have gotten into any of the joints to interrupt the movement. So far, so good.
Starting off with using the black on the blue sections, and I'm just kind of going in there, just doing every outline I can. I'm not that fussed about being super neat. I'm happy with like little sections coming into the actual panels themselves because it's going to double as weathering as well. Plus, it'll give that sketchy, like painterly feel that the Arcane art style really embodies. My gold sections are getting a little bit of the brown and black mixed together just so I don't end up with like a really muddy color. I keep that warmth of the gold. For final touches, I have a metallic white airbrush paint so it's nice and thin, and I'm just going to do a couple little sketchy lines on some of the blue panels, kind of just as a highlighter. And then all of a sudden we're done and it's looking fantastic. Like if you look at these side by side, you can really see that that shading and outline and highlight just really makes everything pop.
Good morning, guys. The gauntlets are done. They're just outside drying from a couple layers of clear top coat just to protect the paint. Aside from that, everything's done. That means it's time for the reveal. And this is going to be just as much a reveal for me as it is for you guys, because I also haven't seen it all on together. As you can see, I've already started working on my hair to try and style it like Vi's. Look, wigs and hair are my absolute weak spot when it comes to cosplay, so I don't want any shade in the comments, okay? I'm just kidding. You can roast me as much as you want. I try not to brag too much, but holy heck, I did a good job with this one. The colors, the movement, the lighting. I'm even pretty chuffed with the makeup, and I don't usually do this kind of style. There's one last test for the gloves though. How's that for product placement? I can't believe that worked. You guys, this was an absolute roller coaster of a project. The fact that I managed to do this in, I think what turned out to be like 3.5 weeks total is just insane. I can't believe how well those gloves worked. A huge thank you, of course, to Red Bull for sponsoring this project. Don't forget to head into your local Woolworths to scan and win exclusive in-game prizes or a chance to win a trip for 2 people to League of Their Own in Europe in 2025. And of course, an extra big special thank you to my ultimate supporters. These are my top tier supporters on Patreon. Artemis, Brian Crow, Dakota, Fluky, Mix Randvi, Rakishan, Residual Images, Robert Mischief, Tamara, Vera Lynn, and Yuri. And thank you as well to these other amazing supporters who are on screen now. If you want to join us over on Patreon, I post occasional work-in-progress previews, sometimes entirely exclusive mini videos and projects. And joining is the best way that you can support me to keep making weird and overly ambitious projects like this one. But even just being here, watching, liking, commenting, subscribing, sharing with your mum or your friend or your boss, all those things that keep the YouTube robots happy, that keeps me happy too. So thank you very, very much for your support. Let me know in the comments section which Arcane character is your favorite and why it's Vi. Actually, I can't even make that joke. Arcane just has too many good characters. Anyway, I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!